Hey animal lovers, and welcome back to this YouTube channel on communication and social life of parrots. In this video I will discuss sentience and empathy in parrots. Do parrots feel and sense, and do they feel for others? Emotions, sentience and empathy in animals are delicate topics and currently hotly debated, as they may reign the economist's parade and many people's convenient thinking patterns. If animals have emotions and suffer, if they are sentient and empathic, we humans need new approaches to justifying when we treat them badly. We can't go with thinking animals are dumb and they don't care how we treat them for any longer, but we should move on to applying our dissociative skills to animals too, the same ones we can easily use when we tune out abused, tortured and murdered humans who are not our next of kin. Excuse my sarcasm. Before I move on to parrots, I will give my very best to provide a brief objective overview of the current state of knowledge regarding sentience and empathy in animals in general. Since very long ago, we humans believe that animals are somehow inferior to us, that they are emotionless apparatuses with automatic reactions and responses to any environmental stimuli. So it's okay, or we are like doing them a favor when we make them serve as masters. I never understood where this attitude came from, but I think it is part of our Western, so-called First World Society's ideology of life, in which we see ourselves as superior to basically everything, except for our next of kin. We raised our young accordingly throughout centuries, so those attitudes are deeply rooted in our ways of thinking, and still very popular today. And because our baseline is animals are dumb and they don't care how we treat them, we turned the tables on scientists, requesting scientific proof of animals not being inferior, dumb apparatuses. Although this baseline is weird, and despite my lack of understanding of why the burden of proof lies with the animals, and why principles of humaneness don't just apply to animals, let's turn our attention to scientific discoveries in terms of animal emotions. Because animals can talk and thus can tell us about their emotions, and because emotions mostly reveal themselves in uneasy moments, a widespread research approach is to inflict pain on animals by, for example, injuring them or giving them electric shocks. When placed in a setting in which they can request pain-relieving substances or in which they can turn off the source of the pain, all tested animal groups showed strong preferences for ending the pain, either via respective drugs or via trying to turn off the source of the pain, unless they had gotten used to the pain. But that's an entirely different topic. Control animals, so animals without pain, behaved normally. Experiments of this kind have been carried out with mice, rats, cows, pigs, chickens, and so on. All have shown that they can feel pain, so all these animals feel. Empathy in animals has been researched as well. In one of such experiments, rats sat next to each other. One of them was able to press a bar, which gave it food, while the rat next to it received an electric shock. All the rats refused to press the food-providing bar as soon as they had realized that their bar pressing inflicted pain on their neighbor, even if this meant that they starved themselves. Many groups of animals have been studied separately, because we humans request proof of each group separately. It was shown that all of them feel. So there's ample of scientific proof for emotions and also empathy in animals. Now let's move on to parrots. First, let me assure you that to date, and to my knowledge, no studies have been conducted that used disturbing experiments. From now on, we again follow the primatologists, as we did in the intelligence video, because the primatologists can get along without disturbing experiments and can make their point through reporting observations of spontaneous, meaningful behavior. My hypothesis is that parrots are sentient and empathic, and I will now describe behavior that I observed among my parrots to support my hypothesis. You can then decide for yourself whether you are convinced. However, before I move on, let me emphasize that despite of their emotions and empathy, parrots are also hellishly selfish. They are constantly on the lookout for advantages for themselves and try to secure these advantages for themselves. Whoever comes first or whoever wins a fight goes first. Those who are too weak or too slow go home empty-handed or become lunch to predators. That's just how nature works. It would be foolish to claim otherwise. At the same time, parrot parents spare no effort while caring for their young, and parrots live in groups, so they must be somehow tuned in what's going on with others. And there are moments when you can get an idea of their emotions and emotional connectedness toward each other. When I sleep, my parrots usually sit with me and rest too. This kind of group behavior is very common. Eating when everyone is eating, preening when everyone is preening, resting when everyone is resting. What's interesting is that they are different when I am ill. Dani in particular seems restless and checks on me all the time. He then goes to my head, examines my face, my neck, or he just sits on me somehow and stays put. Of course, I can't know what drives Dani in these moments, but he certainly notices that something is odd with me, and that makes him uneasy in return. Here, about a year ago, I was suffering from COVID-19, which is not an issue for parrots, by the way, and Dani kept checking on me over and over again. In the spring of this year, I received some devastating news. I could only cry for many hours. Dani and Steffi came to me, and Dani didn't leave my side for hours. Steffi also kept coming to me. She seemed overwhelmed and did not know what to do. At that time, Pippi and Jenny were still quite new to our home. They were so confused about me crying terribly, they just wouldn't leave the aviary, which is peculiar, because Pippi never withdrew like that before and she never showed such behavior again afterwards. So all of my parrots realized that something was wrong with me. Of course, I can't know whether they really felt with me, and it's possible that their behavior was nothing but an automatic reaction to my strange behavior, including odd sobbing and water pouring out of my eyes. In the case of Pippi and Jenny, who withdrew and stayed away from me, you may argue so, but Steffi and Dani were different. They really made an effort. They wanted to be with me, and it seemed to me like they were trying to find out what was going on. You may argue that Steffi and Dani had probably just learned that I am more useful to them when I am not crying, or you may argue that they simply tried to win my attention. But none of this reasoning can explain away the fact that they reacted super sensitively to my behavior for hours and adapted their own behavior accordingly. All my parrots understood and responded to my experience in their own ways. The outside aviary of my 4 parrots has a somewhat slippery entrance. In the beginning, the 4 of them had to practice going in and out for a while. Once in the evening, when I wanted them to come inside, I went to the hatch from the inside and called them all. Dani came first, then Steffi went on her way, but she slipped at the entrance and fell. Dani, who was already with me and wanted to cuddle, immediately and spontaneously went back outside and looked after Steffi. When he saw that Steffi was okay and was already getting ready for another landing maneuver, Dani came back inside, and shortly afterwards, Steffi came too. I found Dani's behavior remarkable. Dani resigned from his advantage and his privileged position on my shoulder and looked after Steffi. Dani gains nothing from such behavior, and he gains nothing from checking on me when I'm ill. He gains nothing from being with me when I cry. He gets nothing out of checking on Steffi after she slips, but he does it anyway, instantly, spontaneously, without training, and without getting a reward for it. I can only speculate what drives him. Maybe he identifies with me and Steffi in such a way that he immediately notices when something is wrong. You may argue that Dani is perhaps just curious when my head is at a higher than usual temperature, when water is pouring out of my eyes. But his reaction to Steffi slipping off shows that his behavior is more than just a blunt reaction of curiosity. He himself was already at the comfortable cuddle spot, but he gave it up again and even took a potential risk when he checked on Steffi. You may remember that he was new to that aviary too, and what if Steffi had been in serious trouble or became dinner to a predator? You only do something like that if you feel responsible in some way, when you are honestly worried. Our vet visited us at home once. All my parrots are terrified of the vet, just like many people are terrified of the dentist. But Dani behaved incredibly. Despite being very scared himself, he positioned himself right in front of the vet so that Steffi and I were behind him. The vet was baffled. It seemed like Dani was trying to shield Steffi and me from the vet. Now you could argue that Dani's behavior is strange because he was hand-raised by me, as I explained in the first video, and this objection is certainly justified. Nevertheless, I would like to counter that he must have the potential to stand up for his loved ones in some way. Many male parrots go to great lengths for their ladies. I think Dani is similar, except that having been hand-raised makes him less fearful toward people. We recently shared our home with 2 visiting parrots for temporary care. One of them had hardly any experience with people and was naturally afraid of me at first. In the meantime, Pippi and Jenny have long since learned that they don't need to be afraid of me, and Steffi and Dani have never been afraid of me anyway. However, it was intriguing that all of my parrots displayed alarmed, concerned body language, being very upright and scanning the situation, as well as fearful body language, being very slim, thin, and ready to fly for their lives, when the 2 new arrivals were afraid. Regardless of the situation, and even when it was clear that nothing would happen to them, it was as if the fear response of one parrot initially overrode all other emotions and behaviors of my 4 parrots. My parrots joined into the 2 new arrivals' fear. However, after a few seconds, my parrots calmed down again. Reacting hypersensitively to fear of others is like utilizing all possible hints on any potential dangers. Processing those hints into a fearful reaction of yourself makes perfect sense in flight animals, like parrots, who don't want to become predator lunch. Dani, Steffi, and her fellows Pippi and Jenny are Amazon parrots. These are medium-sized parrots, quite lively and kobold-like. Many predators love to eat them. However, I would like to cover some macaw behavior here as well. Macaws are bigger parrots. They evolved into ecological niches with somewhat less predatory pressure, so they can afford more commiserative behavior. So next let me describe a very sad incident which involves 2 macaws. One day after a long illness, a macaw from a long-standing pair relationship was dying. It was lying on the ground. While the macaw was dying, its partner never left its side, kept trying to feed the dying bird, cuddled up to it, never left. The healthy macaw could have simply gone to the outside aviary and hung out with his friends and let the partner die alone, in a out of sight, out of mind manner. But he didn't do that. He was there the whole time, until the very end. After his partner had passed away, he still stayed, until the dead macaw was removed. I would never have expected such behavior in parrots. After all, parrots are so different from mammals. They are direct descendants of dinosaurs. Evolution has separated them from us for over 300 million years. They are flight animals and should avoid being in vulnerable situations at all costs in order to avoid becoming predator lunch. Staying on the ground makes a parrot super vulnerable. It is downright madness for a parrot. But that's what the healthy macaw has done. I still get very sad when I think about it. It was one of the saddest moments I ever witnessed throughout my entire life. He truly was taking the dying macaw's perspective. He understood what was needed and responded in very true ways. There is no other explanation for why he stayed for hours, tried to provide food, cuddled up to the dying macaw. Of course, not every parrot-pair bond is that strong, and not all parrots behave in this way. And not all humans are empathic toward other humans either. But many people, if the love of their life were about to die, would probably stay by their side until the very end, just like the macaw did. The surviving macaw mourned for many months afterwards. He did not like to eat, he did not like to hang out with his friends. He withdrew for quite some time before he slowly resumed life again. We humans would probably do the same, just like elephants, other primates, whales, and many other animals. And I saved a nice anecdote for the end. My father had once made friends with another macaw lady. Her name was Moni. Moni was also in a very good relationship with Harley, her macaw partner. Mooney greeted my father every day, came to his shoulder, and stayed with him for a few minutes until she returned to Harley. At this point, let me mention that during breeding season, parrots experience violent hormonal changes and that parrots prioritize their breeding business over everything else. They can be very territorial and aggressive during that time. While hatching, females only leave their eggs for a few minutes per day. They are super focused on their eggs and then their chicks. Mooney was like that too, but at the same time she continued to come to my father's shoulder for a few minutes each day. Despite hatching her eggs, she greeted my father as usual and spent a little time with him. She did this voluntarily and never got a reward for it. Needless to say that Mooney did not behave like that toward me or other humans. Despite everything, Mooney hatched her eggs very reliably and cared well for her family. Are parrots sentient and empathic? Decide for yourself. I think they are. I would like to close this video with a picture from the movie Pirates of the Caribbean. There's a pirate with a macaw on his shoulder. I've always wondered how parrots actually got their pirate companion image. I don't think this image does them justice at all. Let me offer an alternative image. Parrots are often very, very loyal beings who stand by their partners or humans even under challenging conditions, and those loyal individuals among parrots would stay with their partners and humans until the very end, regardless of whether they put themselves in danger. Thank you for watching and see you next time.